we have two great matchups. The first one is going to be Rampage versus Rascal Jester, as you see on your scene, and later on we'll get to see Detonation Focus Me taking on Unsold Stuff Gaming. Now these are three of the strongest teams in the LJL. Last year they only dropped sets to each other. All three teams ended up going 8-2 on the regular season, and tonight, that's really the matchup that we are really looking forward to, is Detonation Focus Me versus Unsold Stuff Gaming. But that's not to discount Rascal Jester at all. Rascal Jester has been a mainstay of the Japanese scene for a long time, and despite only taking, they went 3-7 on the last split, which was great. They were able to maintain dominance over the lowest teams, and they were even able to take a couple of games off of the top teams. And last week we saw them take a game off of Unsold Stuff Gaming, matching their record for most of the lower teams in a single week that they had achieved over the entire first split. But now we're going to be seeing them play up against Rampage, who many people are predicting to be the top team in the Japanese league for the summer split. Most of our I love Dara win. I love it. But most of our international viewers are mostly familiar with Rampage from their tenure at the most recent mid-season invitational, where they did not have necessarily a strong showing. They did manage to pick up a single win up against the Oceanic Direwolves, but unfortunately they did not manage to take anything else off of any of the other teams. They had a couple strong performances against both the Red Canids and, oh boy, escaping me, I believe it was Supermassive Esports from Turkey and Brazil, but unfortunately they weren't able to pull it through. But they have not needed to make any changes to their roster. They've been a very strong team altogether, with a number of stars on the team, particularly Tussle and Yutori Moyashi in the jungle and at the ADC. And those are the people we're really going to need to look at tonight to see if they can really push through the rest of the split. On the other hand, of course, Rascal Jester, last time we saw them do really well, it was really off of the back of their jungler Wyvern, excuse me. Does not play Ivern, at least not yet, but he had a great time. He was able to get massive leads up against Unsold Stuff Gaming's jungler Neo, and just really push through, get massive leads for himself. Unfortunately, in at least one of the games, they weren't able to carry that through into lead on all of the members of the team. It was just a lead coming up for Wyvern in that jungle, and if he can continue to pressure for the rest of his team, get gold leads on other members, pick up objectives so that the gold becomes more multiplicative with itself, we can easily see them coming through and really winning a lot more games. For now, though, they are playing up against the number 1 seed. It'll be interesting to see how it is that they adapt to the different meta that Rampage brings as opposed to Unsold Stuff. Unsold Stuff brings a lot more of a dancing style of team fights, whereas Rampage, they've learned a little bit. Even in their couple of games that we've seen this split, we can tell that they're a little bit more confident, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more decisive in their shot calling than what we were used to seeing in the spring split. And that's that international experience that they are really starting to bring to bear on the Japanese scene. Of course, we have not yet seen them play against any of the other top tier teams. Last week they played up against Burning Core, who was really dominated by only 2 players, Mei Z and Hollis. They were really able to shut it down. Yesterday we actually saw Burning Core take on 7th Heaven, and it was really interesting to watch the draft phases. Japan is a region that is largely focused on the imports, almost entirely from Korea actually, to really be the stars of their team. And we're really seeing this with the bans. Yesterday, of the 15 bans that each team had, roughly 12 to 13 of them were all focused on 2 players. And that was Burning Core's Hollis, who we saw a Zed No Blanc ban every single game, both against Rampage and against 7th Heaven now. And almost all the bans from Burning Core were towards the jungler. But that's not the match we're going to be talking about today. We're talking about Rascal Jester and Rampage, and the first ban coming out is going to be Orianna, which is not a surprising ban. Orianna has been a strong pick throughout the world recently because it's just very safe. It's a good first pick. You can do anything you want with it, and it allows you so many team compositions. But Lavier here on Rascal Jester has shown that he has a more unusual champion pool. In his last set, he did play Aurelion Sol, Anivia, and Orianna. And if you can just remove Aurelion Sol, something that a lot of teams aren't really practiced with, just like we see excuse me, Huhi in North America, other teams haven't built around it. They're not used to playing with it, and by extension, many of them aren't used to playing against it. And we just see his champion pool, things they aren't used to playing, just banned out. If you can shut that down, you'll see what else you how deep does the rabbit hole of Lavia's champion pool really go. But for now, all three bans being focused at the solo laners of Rampage, meaning that we're likely going to see a very first pick, Zac, and that is not surprising. North America in Diamond Plus solo queue has over 100%, 120% ban rate on that champion, and here we see it come through. And in across the world, nobody's been letting Zac through simply because of how dangerous it is. And Rampage could have made a very, very large drafting mistake, as they are still playing on the patch 7.10, where Zac is a complete monster. In return, they get a Galio and a Thresh, who are a couple of strong champions, but you're not picking up the Lee Sin, you're not picking up, a couple of the other power picks that you could potentially pick up, and you're really, you're giving away something like a Gragas that's probably going to go over to Achimomo, as well as some of the power pick ADCs. Ashe, Varus, Caitlyn are all particularly strong right now on 7.10, and it's really important to get those early picks for yourself. Yutori Miyashi has tended to favor a couple more aggressive ADCs, something like that Caitlyn, something like that Lucian, so he might not be as worried about it. But he is going to go for that Xayah, which is something we haven't been seeing a whole lot internationally. We've seen a little bit of it in North America. Zeros actually was playing for it in a couple last set. That Burning Core was playing up against Rampage, and now we'll have to see if Yutori, one of the best ADCs in Japan, is really able to do anything with this champion. But with that, we do get to the second phase of bans. It is going to be the Braum as the first one coming out from Rampage, and that's not really surprising. You reduce the options available to the other team, and I wouldn't really be surprised if we started seeing a lot more bans focused on towards Tussle and Romney, who are both, they don't necessarily have the largest champion pool. Tussle has a large one, but Romney, we have long criticized him for not having a very large champion pool. We haven't seen the Syndra banned yet. I mean, he had over half of his games last split played, another half of them at the midseason invitational banned as well, and he has not picked a champion yet. So they either have something that they're getting ready to pull out, give him the counter pick up against whatever it is that Lavia choose to pick up, or we'll have to see him something on much more comfortable. The Orianna is banned out, the Talia is banned out. He hasn't played a Nivea or Aurelion Sol, and the Cassin isn't something he's played either, but we have seen some fantastic LeBlanc play from this guy as well, and we see that from his solo queue accounts, particularly in Korea, a lot as well, simply because it has so much strong carry potential. But right now, we're going to have to see what it is they do choose to pick up. They're looking for a jungler. Whoa. That is... I would really like to see this Ivern. They do finally lock that in. That is not something we see a lot of in Japan. Neo on Unsold Stuff was one of the only people who was playing Ivern in Japan, and we criticized them at MSI. They didn't have this in their champion pool. They had to ban it away every time. They couldn't first pick it, and so it limited their drafting options significantly. And in exchange, we are going to see a couple more tanky supports being picked up. Japan has long had this loving relationship with Tahm Kench. He's been a popular top laner. Evie played it at MSI. It's been a common flex. You see Dar play it. You see Evie play it. We saw Utapon play it. We saw Vivid play it. It's something that everyone in Japan, where that's a reasonable option, they do pick it up. And the Syndra is another call out towards Ramane. He has not yet picked his champion, and this is his signature champion. If Lavia can show, hey, I can play our champion, but better, this is going to be a huge, huge boost to the team of Rascal Jester. But Rampage does finally have that counter pick for Ramane, and we haven't seen a whole lot. He's only really played about 4 champions, and they're all banned out. I wouldn't be surprised if we did end up seeing that LeBlanc getting a secondary. Kennen. Ugh. Of course. What could we be thinking? We've been seeing so much of this internationally. The Galio mid just being such a strong option. It has tons of wave clear early game, plenty of early game damage, and you can flex it there. Evie hasn't necessarily had the most success on these carry top laners though, but Kennen against that Gragas is a great matchup, and I'm excited to see exactly what he is that they are able to do. This is I really hope they do trade that. I don't want to see a Thresh jungle coming out from Tussle. That's not really something uh, that really makes a whole lot of sense in my mind. And with the 20-second mark coming up, we're probably going to see something coming up with a new champion select. I know in a lot of other regions they do have an issue with that, where if you don't trade your champions before the 20-second mark, you do end up potentially losing a ban unless they can prove that there's a technical issue with it. But for right now, I do like their composition overall. We're starting to see a lot of this internationally with the two supports. In this case, it's the Ivern and the Thresh, and to a lesser extent, the Galio really helping out the double ADC composition coming out from Kennen and Xayah, who both do tons of damage, and Evie and that split push on that Kennen should have plenty of pressure on the rest of the map. On the other hand, they did give away the Zac, and that Zac is such a huge playmaker. He's able to jump in on anyone he wants to, basically with impunity, because he's so tanky. All he needs is two items before he becomes nearly unkillable: the Cinder Hulk, and it could be the Spirit Visage, which was buffed, which now has 30% healing increase across everything, and that includes blobs, where he's able to stabilize in the jungle at a higher health than he was before the Spirit Visage changes. But he has such a strong ability to engage for his team, and he's definitely a lot safer as well, as he's able to, if something gets too dangerous, Tahm Kench will eat him, take him away, and he'll just be completely fine, and he's got at least 2 or 3 lives that he's able to rely on consistently. And it does look like the pause coming out, it does look like something was going incorrectly with that, with a champion select. We're likely going to see a new one with the same picks and bans. So there's going to be a couple extra moments before we are able to get into the game. But we will really have to see Lavier really stepping up to really be the strong Syndra that we really need him to be if Rascal Jester want to, have a chance against some of these better teams. He needs to show that he can play the meta. Playing Aurelion Sol, playing Anivia is great, but if you only have to play these unusual champions, other teams will be able to quickly pick up on that and really shut you down. So we'll have to see how they do adapt over the rest of the game, but for now, it is just going to be an early advantage potentially for Rascal Jester simply on the strength of their composition. But if they do let the game go past that 25, 30, 35 minute marks, it's going to get a lot scarier as you have to deal with 3-item Kennen, the Blade of the Ruin King. I actually call this the Yordle build to a decent extent. The Blade of the Ruin King, Ruin's Hurricane, and Frozen Mallet. You can build it on so many Yordles. The most obvious one is Kennen, who we see it on almost every top laner. But Lulu can build it. Teemo can build it. We've seen Reckless build it on Tristana as well in EU, and even to a lesser extent, you see a little bit more of that coming out from characters like Gnar, who still go for the Blade of the Ruin King and the Frozen Mallet in a number of the games as well. So, pretty much every Yordle except for like Kled and Rumble, who are both melee. But as we start to move forward, it is going to be a very dangerous thing. You have the Xayah, who does tons of damage, builds that Essence Reaver, that Ruinous Hurricane, and with all the extra crit damage on the Blade Caller, she should be in a fantastic spot to really dish out these team fights. Really, we're going to start to see a lot more pressure early in the game. I'd like to see Wyvern go for some early invades with the help of that Gragas, the early shove that he is able to provide, as well as the Syndra. And if they can get a lot of pressure down onto this Ivern early and potentially counter jungle. Ivern likes to go into the enemy's jungle, potentially pick up a 2-buff, potentially 3-buffing your opponent. It would be a great thing if they were able to find him out, or even just keep Zac even in terms of all the buffs and everything else that they are able to pick up. But let's take a look. Anything interesting happening in the Twitterverse right now? It doesn't look like it. People are talking about, the different things. People are talking a little bit about the different things that champions or the players are playing. Ramune mid, doing some very interesting things, and Evie, definitely one of the more popular players in Japan for the most part. He seems very personable, very active on Twitter, very interested in everything that's going on. And it'll be really cool. It's really cool to just watch him talk in some of his interviews. He's very polite, very, very much that archetype of a very nice person. And it'll be it's really cool to see him play in the LGL where he does have a much more forceful personality and is able to really move around. You see him come out on flanks all the time, catch out the enemy backline, and really start some good fights. But that's not the kind of role he's going to be playing for us in this first game. Cannon does a little bit of that with the slicing maelstrom, is able to get stuns on a lot of members, but unless he's going for an AP build, which we haven't seen in competitive in such a long time, it'll be difficult to really see, you know, the same style of play really working out for him. Hopefully they're able to adapt. Hopefully they've been able to pick up some of the strategies the rest of the world has been pioneering over the past couple of weeks, over the past couple of games, and really bring it to Japan. A couple of other things that we tend to see in Japan, or rather, don't tend to see in Japan that we often see internationally, is, they weren't playing the Kennen for a long time. They weren't playing the Rumble. They weren't playing the Ivern. They've had limited uses for the Jarvan, who's now starting to draw a little bit of bans, as we saw there. Evie trying to shift his playstyle is what that says to me. Both the Jarvan and the Fiora banned out there, which are both, Jarvan's a great, what do you call it? Great synergy with something like that Orianna, or even the Syndra, just able to go in, set everybody up in a small area so it's much easier to hit all that AoE. But, yeah, the champions that Japan has been playing are potentially more interesting than what they are playing, because the really only big things that they play that we haven't seen internationally has been that Tahm Kench, mostly as a top laner, actually. So it'll be interesting to see what it is that they are able to do everywhere else. In terms of the individual lane matchups, it is going to be really interesting to see how Yutori and Dara match up against the Rascal Jester bot lane of Noah and Yuki. Yutori Miyashi and Dara, they have a strong laning phase, not necessarily the best in Japan. They at least go even almost all of the time, but where they really start to shine is after the laning phase is over, after a couple of towers have gone down. You see Yutori go to a side lane and really start to build up huge CS advantages and eventually come to that 20-25 minute team fight, 50 CS up on your opponent, even in gold otherwise, and just, that's an easy, extra zeal, extra BF sword that he is able to bring to bear and just have massive, massive team fight presence. Meanwhile, since he's off in a side lane, it does allow Dara to roam a lot more, help potentially the weaker mid lane that Ramune often brings. He's not a particularly confident or aggressive laner. He is much more interested in going even, which was interesting to watch on the Syndra last season. He wasn't necessarily able to build the individual leads that you might expect on that champion, and is much more prone to going something like that cleanse or that barrier than many of the other international mid laners that we've been seeing. It was actually a huge deal last night to watch Gung in China playing up against Dan Gaming. He went with that Ignite Syndra. He ended up getting punished for it, but it's just the kind of aggression you're able to see. Bjergsen's much more interested in that. Fager's much more interested in that. Perks, again, all these strong mid laners are favoring that Ignite for the most part. Sometimes an Exhaust as well, but it's not something that Ramune necessarily has the confidence to do. He's much more interested in those defensive summoner spells. Let's take a look. Anything else interesting from these two compositions? Not a whole lot. The Gragas has just been a very safe pick, just as we've seen with Galio, and it'd be really interesting to see. I'm sure for anybody who's been playing for more than about a season and a half, we all remember the days of AP Gragas, and it's not, I don't want to say it's a good build, but it's definitely something that you can still do, even though it's not quite as meta. It still does a lot of damage, especially if you get ahead early. The explosive cask layered on with the body slam, and if you have a Lich Bane on that W proc on your next auto attack, it will just one-shot the backline, and you just become, instead of a tank, you still are relatively tanky because of the damage reduction provided by your W, but you also become a pseudo-assassin ready to just blow apart the enemy team and just single out a single member and remove them from the game. But that's not what we see in Japan. I would love to see it, and with the Galio shifting mid as as the first tank starts heading mid lane, it'll be an interesting thing to see, what will Riot do to push that? Will Riot allow Galio to stay in the mid lane? Will they start pushing other tanks to be playable in the mid lane? Will that Gragas become a mid laner again, just able to play up against Galio while we see a rise of the carry top laners? Things like that Jarvan, things like that Fiora, things like this Kennen are starting to become more popular. And if they're able to continue doing that, push that, if they like what they see with more of that, it could be a very interesting World 2017. At the same time, though, they are starting to limit a lot of the other things that are going on. While we do see perhaps the most open meta that we've seen in a long time, we're seeing the Xayah coming out in the ADC. We're seeing things like Callista being played last night. Who was it? Excuse me. It was Zeros, the former ADC of Detonation Focus Me, the current ADC of Burning Core. He's able to play that Callista, something that we're starting to see a little bit more internationally. Tristana is starting to make a comeback, particularly being pushed by players like Reckless in EU. But, there's so much openness in most of our positions, except for the support right now. Really, we're seeing Lulu being banned out, or being picked or banned, Khamra being picked or banned, Thresh being picked or banned, and then after that, you're really left with Zyra, and to a lesser extent, we're still seeing some Braum come out as well. And, simply because of that, there's only those two tiers of supports that we see. We often see tons of junglers banned out, and after the changes to Rek'Sai, when we'll get to see all the play on 7.11, we'll get to see a lot more. But yesterday, we saw 5 jungle bans being targeted at the jungler for 7th Heaven. We saw the Lee Sin, the Zac, the Elise, the Kha'Zix, the Graves band, and eventually we just ended up settling on Savage's Rengar, which had some great success yesterday. But it's just, there's so many options for people to fall back on, and the junglers have, they're used to having a large champion pool because it gets attacked all the time. Mid laners are used to this. Top laners are now, they're starting to get a little bit more lax. They are able to have, a large champion pool, as we see things like the Jarvan, the Kennen, the Camille for a while, the Fiora. We're starting to see Renekton make a comeback again, especially, I imagine we'll see it more on 7.11 after they undo all of the weird changes they made to him in terms of his on animation canceling. Where they, in the 7.11 patch notes, they basically said, hey guys, we screwed up. We're gonna go back and undo all of that so you can be where he was before as an animation canceling champion. But, yeah, I don't know. Very interesting spot in the meta right now. Riot's doing overall a fantastic job in terms of their champion balance. There are much fewer champions that are unplayable right now than I believe at any other point in my history of playing League of Legends since I've been playing, in the middle of Season 2. Almost everything is viable. There's not the same kind of trinity of ADCs as we're used to saying. The trinity of, it used to be Corki, Graves, Ezreal, 2 Triforce champions in Graves, who was able to have the true grip passive, able to power through all of the early damage they were bringing and just power through everything. But hey, we're back. We finished up the champion select, back with all the same picks and bans. It looks like they've solved the trading issue. We'll give it one more look. Tussle and Dara do manage to trade this time, so we're going to be getting into game in just a moment. Hooray! We get to see Rascal, Jester, and Rampage play. It's gonna be a treat for everyone. So the Tom Kench. Nothing particularly interesting coming out from the summer spells. The biggest thing that we do see is Ramene's choice to go for that teleport in the mid lane, which is really, really good for the rest of Rampage. If he's more confident on that champion, at least to the point of, hey, I'm not going to die, it means he can stay in lane for a lot longer. It means he can have more global presence. It means he can move around, use that grand entrance to give huge amounts of damage reduction to whatever target it is that does need it. And there we go. All of our players lined up. So Tussle and Dara, 2 of the strongest players in the LGL, both Korean imports, and they're doing a fantastic job for Rampage. They really took them You know, Rampage has been one of the two teams in Japan that has always been at the top of the league, tied with Detonation Focus Me, ever since it was the Japan Premier League. I believe it was in 2013 where they started that up. Detonation Focus Me and Rampage have been trading back and forth, and Rampage is looking to be in a very good spot. But we're going to be loading into the Rift in just a moment right now as Rampage and Rascal Jester move into their lanes. I think. Let's go. I hope we don't have another tactical pause. Okay, cool. We're going to be moving in right here. It's going to be great. I really love this opening that the Japanese production team has put together for us. Moving around, just seeing the beautiful Summoner's Rift that has been put together over the past couple of years, ever since the Rift update. And we are seeing one of the interesting things that we've been seeing recently on 7.10 is just how strong Doran's Shield has been allowed to become with the miniature Spectre's Cowl passive that it has built onto it. You know, anybody with a damage over time effect, something like that Cassiopeia, something like that Rumble, that Singed in particular, were nerfed a little bit if your opponent did choose to go for that Doran Shield, simply because if you didn't do more than a couple damage per second, it just out-healed the damage you would put on them. And unless you were willing to take much more extended trades, the Doran Shield would just power through anything you were hoping to do. And right now, Gragas doesn't have the ability to go for particularly extended trades. And there we see the Twitter vote coming in. Rampage with 79%. And that is no surprise to anybody who's been following the Japanese scene for any length of time. Rampage, probably the favorites for the split, and definitely the favorites for this game. Nothing particularly interesting coming out from the starts other than the Doran Shield on Kennen. A very good option, giving him the ability to sustain through any damage that Aoyama tries to put on him. And Lavier is going to help Wyvern out here with those Raptors. Very good start. Tussle doesn't need the same kind of help from the rest of his team. Just going to be able to pick up. Oh, he's not going to smite that blue buff or red buff. I wonder where he's going to go. They did put a ward down onto Wyvern's blue buff, and it looks like Tussle is going to be heading over there, pings towards it, and that means that Evi's going to have to push against Aoyama early in this lane, and it looks like Tussle's going to be able to do it pretty much uncontested. He is spotted out by that ward, does smite it, but that means that Wyvern will have the opportunity to try and trade that blue buff, really negating the advantage that Tussle could have built up on that, and we do see him heading towards that own blue buff, so it'll be interesting to see exactly what it is that Rampage does to try and deny that. It doesn't matter if you pick up the buff if your opponent is just able to pick it up on their own. And right now, Yutori and Dara have not pushed up in the lane all that much, so it is going to be probably should be a clean steal. Here comes Tussle, realizes that Wyvern is there and is going to try and stop it. He does have the red buff, pushes down the bushes, but we're already finding the exhaust goes down onto Noah, forced to blow the heal. That's the first summoner coming out, and there comes the Devourer coming out of Yuki. It should be flying. He's forced to flash out, and it's not quite done yet. Dara's going to look for that flay, does manage to find it. Yuki does not have his flash. He's rooted up once again. That should be first blood in just a moment. Does go first blood over to Yutori Moyashi, and that is massive. That is not the person you want to be giving gold over to, especially this early in the game. He's going a Doran Shield. All your other lanes are going even or better right now. Wyvern doesn't manage to pick up the blue buff, and overall, that's a huge swing in momentum and gold already over to Rampage, and we're only 3.5 minutes in. Well, Romney is going aggressive right here onto Syndra, not going to be able to find a whole lot, and we do see a pause coming out once again. I wonder what this pause could be about. We didn't see anything. Uh-oh. Noah seems to be having some connection issues this early in the game that could potentially be a remake, depending on how it is the Japanese administrators do choose to go about it. But right now, it's very interesting to see how quickly this game really turned on its head. We saw Yuki trying to head up towards the blue buff, try and help out. Oh, yeah, it is a Rascal Jester pause. So Noah does disconnect from the game. He will be coming back later on, we're sure, but what it'll do to the game state could be very surprising. Yuki did start moving up towards the blue buff, leaving Noah alone, where he did get hit by the death sentence from Dara, and we all saw exactly what happened after that. They were simply able to chase it down. Yuki wasn't able to flash far enough or flash over the wall to really get both of their members to safety. And with all four of the summoners down, and I believe it was only the exhaust being blown by Dara to get that first kill, if the game state stays as it is, it will be absolutely massive for Rampage as they really start to build up an early lead, hit those item spikes earlier, and really start to push around and really take advantage of the fact that they have a later scaling comp. They won't necessarily need to do a whole lot, but they'll have the option to, which is very important in League of Legends, especially at this level of play. You can do a lot of different things if you just have a gold advantage. You push them around, pick up early dragons, pick up the Rift Herald, both of which are in many ways win more conditions. They're things that you are able to get if you're ahead pretty much for free, and if you can get the first one, it means you can get the second one, get the third one, and really just snowball out of control. And Yutori, we'd said he doesn't necessarily have the strongest laning phase, but if you give him a lead, that middling skill laning phase jumps up to something that could really take over the game really quickly. He's not on necessarily the same kind of playmaking ADC as we necessarily saw him last split, where we saw a lot of Lucian, a lot of Jhin, who are able to just find someone out, two-shot them, dash around the fight, and do pretty much whatever they want, or that Varus who just does insane damage during team fights. Zarya does comparable damage in team fights to Varus, but she is a lot more rear-loaded than Varus is what we're used to, and we are getting back into game. It doesn't look like whatever bug or latency issue we were seeing is going to be going into a remake, and we are sitting here at 1,000 gold lead on Rampage at under the 4-minute mark, and that's going to be absolutely huge as we start to see where the gold starts to go. 8 CS lead. Ramee is getting poked out quite hard, doesn't have to flash away, but Yuki's also in a bad spot right now here in the bot lane as Yutori just picks up the last couple of CS. We're probably going to see a back cycle coming out from them pretty soon. Pick up the pieces to whatever item it is that they choose to go for first. We've been seeing a large trend in... Ooh, he's going to back before getting full health, just trying to push Lavier out of lane. He gets the essentially free back, picks up that Dark Seal, make that corrupting potion even stronger than it already is. But in the ADCs, we've been seeing a lot of focus more towards the critical strike builds from ADCs, especially with characters like Caitlyn. They focus towards the Infinity Edge into the Zeal items, and Zarya, there's a bit of a split in the community as to whether or not it is best to pick up Blade of the Ruined King or the Essence Reaver. And I think for the most part at the competitive level they are leaning towards that Essence Reaver due to the huge pressure that it provides with the cooldowns, with the critical strike, and really everything else. And there we do see the strength. Oh wait, no, he's not level 5 yet. Who am I talking about? But yeah, that's a strong difference there, alright. We see the biggest difference in KDA really being between Yuki and Dara, and I think that's largely simply because Dara doesn't die a whole lot. Last split, Yutori and Dara had basically no deaths throughout the entire split. It wasn't unusual for Yutori to go deathless in a series, and if I remember correctly, in the playoffs he died, I believe, a total of like 4 times over 5 games. No, he died 5 times over 5 games against Unsold Stuff. 3 of them being in the same game where it was against a Vi and Camille back at the height of Camille's power. They both just press R. Ramee is going in, forces Lavier's flash out early. And while he is a little bit behind in CS, that is going to be another forced back. And we're going to need to see Wyvern moving around and really helping out the rest of his team, because right now he has what is considered the strongest pick in the game, but not necessarily able to do anything with it yet. And we are going to see Yutori opting for that BF sword, going towards that Essence Reaver, and potentially an Infinity Edge later on. But nothing surprising coming out from our builds right now. Evie is opting to go for the early Wit's End as opposed to the Blade of the Ruined King first. Both of them are strong items, definitely going to increase your damage, but the difference is he's trying to reduce the damage in the first place rather than sustain off of it, which will be an interesting choice, especially up against Otimo's triple Doran's Ring. build. He's going to have tons of built-in sustain and tons of mana sustain now. So it's going to be difficult to force him out of lane simply because he's effectively an energy champion. He doesn't run out of mana. He has tons of mana sustain. He's got tons of AP for the price right now. And even though Evie is starting to build up a small CS advantage, it's definitely something that they are going to have to work on if they want to extend that. No surprise here, Romane also picking up that Negatron cloak in the mid lane. I don't imagine he's going for the Wit's End like his top lane counterpart, but oh man, Tussel's gonna pick up another buff. That is the 4th buff he's picked up from Wyvern, and the 2nd one in Wyvern's jungle. Wyvern gets a good idea of this. They're pinging towards it, but they do see Tussle heading towards his own red buff already, and it's just too dangerous for Wyvern to go in there alone with the way that his lanes are currently arranged. Lavier doesn't have his flash available. Romane has his ultimate. He can get there much faster than that Syndra can, pretty much regardless. And we are going to see Romane heading down towards that bottom side of the jungle, picks up that red buff, but lots of fighting here in the bot lane. Yutori Mayashi is getting a lot of damage down to Yuki, but the gray health is going to heal him up rather effectively. And with the Bilgewater Cutlass built onto Noah, it's going to be harder to push him out than it was before. But here we see Tussle coming in, lots of damage being put onto Lavia. There's a flash coming out from Romane. He's going to be able to get a lot of damage. Tussle is forced out by the unleashed power, but there's the power of Wyvern Zac coming in, doing tons of damage to both of them as he pulls them together. But Daisy's still in the mix of everything. Romane is pushed low. He doesn't have his flash, but Dar's here first. He's going to be able to help the rest of his team, and that is going to be a 2nd kill going over to Rampage. This time going over to support. Flashes forward, gets the death sentence onto Syndra, and that's going to be another kill. Romane picks one up. That's one on both members of the bot lane and the mid lane right now for Rampage, and that's huge. They're sitting on a 2,000 gold with a team that scales better, and right now they're already ahead. This gold lead that says 2,000 is much more effectively something like a 3,000-4,000 gold lead, simply to the synergy that their champions provide to each other, as opposed to what we see from Rascal Jester. Wyvern still has a flash, but he did not have the Let's Bounce. We're going to take a look at that one more time. Romane flashes forward, gets onto Lavier, and Tussle moves forward, but that shield coming out is so effective. He doesn't necessarily go down right away, and even though Wyvern is in a good spot to potentially get onto Tussle, he's knocked up by Romane and then knocked up immediately after by Daisy, and by the time that Dara gets here, we're almost at, the fight's already done. Lavier does pick that up, but it's not going to matter after that. He's already gone down. He doesn't have his flash available, and now with Lavier's blue buff being put onto Romane, it's in a very dangerous spot for this Syndra. No flash and potentially a strong repeat gank coming out from Tussle. And with all these buffs being picked up by Tussle, he's able to hand them over to all of his solo laners, and the sustain that will come out of that for Evie is going to really match and potentially push him over the edge as he's dealing with Atyamomo. And right now, they're both still 0-0-0. Atyamomo did have to blow his flash earlier. We didn't get to see what that was all about. So it'll hopefully, Death Sentence lands onto Yuki, but the Devourer is going to pull him out. Wall unfortunately wasted there by Dara, but I'd say it would be worth, but Devourer is not that long of a cooldown. Nowhere near as long as Dara's Wall, so that is a lot of all-in power reduced there in the bot lane for Rampage. And potentially a bit of an overstep. Good damage going over onto Yutori Mayashi, who is now sitting on the Caulfield's Warhammer as well. And that is going to be doing so much more damage, especially in short trades, and I guess even in longer trades as well, up against Noah's Ashe. But Noah's Ashe will be able to sustain through these fights, and we do see some good damage being put down onto Yutori, rooting Yuki up, not going to be forced to blow anything. But the sustain that's coming out of the Bilgewater Cutlass could potentially push them over the top right now, as there's only a fairly small lead being built up in that lane. Partly from Dara's long extended roam that was matched way too late by Noah and Yuki. But Tussle is going to be in a very strong spot. 3 assists for him, building towards that early redemption. One of the things that's been so strong about Ivern for a long time is just how cheap his build is. It's a strong build. You'll see things like the locket, like the redemption, like the ardent sensor being built onto this champion. And all these items are support items. You know, supports are known for not getting a lot of gold. Ramen is going to go in, getting a little bit more damage onto Lavia, probably taking a turret shot for his troubles. But Wyvern is being forced out of his own jungle fairly significantly. Tussle seems to be living here a lot more than his own. And there comes Daisy getting a good root onto Wyvern, getting not quite a knockup, but they are doing a good job of denying the vision and just putting the fear into Wyvern as they build up so much control over this dragon. Right now, it's simply going to be a matter of time with the Earth Dragon, one of the most highly rated dragons by many professional players, simply to the objective pressure that it creates. It'll be very strong if Tussle is able to pick that up for his team with the help of Yutori, with the help of Ramune, potentially even with a roam down of Evi, who has now completed that Wit's End. But Rampage is, like we said earlier, is happy to rest on their laurels for a little bit. They don't need to build a strong advantage in any of their lanes. If they're even, they're ahead. When they're ahead, they're massively ahead. And if they just wait it out till they hit a couple of these power spikes, Wyvern is going to spot out, that ward, and should be good to go on that end. But Rascal Jester needs to be the one making plays. We see Aimomo moving in, trying to get a good bearing of where Tussle is, but he's on the opposite side of the map. They get a couple of pings towards him. They do pick up the Krugs right now. And Yutori with a completed Essence Reaver. Dar is here, gets the flay onto Yuki and the Death Sentence. He does have his flash available and is forced to flash out. The Blade Collar comes out, roots him up one more time. Noah's trying to put damage back, but it's not particularly effective. And Ramune will be faster on the collapse if they do choose to head down that direction. Unfortunately, they do see Wyvern there, so they won't be able to dive right now. Wyvern is at one of his early power spikes, as he does have that early level in Let's Bounce and is building towards that Cinderhulk, but they'll be more than happy with the amount of damage they're able to get onto this bot lane turret by themselves. And right now, big advantages in terms of turret pressure and CS starting to be built up by Rampage across the map. Only about 8 in both the mid lane. Here comes Lavia getting caught up once again. He does have his flash available, but that's just more than half of his health bar taken just from Tussle showing up. Ramne just saying, hey, how's it going? Have some gusting winds. And with that Abyssal Scepter already built onto him, Lavia is not doing a whole lot of damage to him, but Ramne is doing plenty of damage in return. Those early levels in that Q, in that E, are going to be really good for the rest of his movement. And Wyvern is just struggling. Evi and Auyamum are going at it really hard right here. Both ultimates committed. Both of them have their flashes available, but that Wit's End is doing so much damage. He flashes out, but the Q does land onto that minion, and missing the stun, that should be Auyamum being fine. But it does raise the question, where's the rest of Rampage? They're going to be able to come up and really pressure Auyamum off this turret. Will Evi able to do that on his own? He has his flash available, and here we go. Grand Entrance comes out. The damage reduction going on to Evi. Ramne is starting to take up the turret, but Wyvern's here as well, trying to put damage back onto the rest of the team. He gets a double knockup, and Auyamum was still alive, and Ramne and Evi are not in a good spot. The unleashed power goes down, does pick up the cannon. Ramne should be next as he starts to take down these turret shots, and that's a huge turn back in the other direction. Wyvern's going to need to land this Q if he wants to do anything to Tussle, but they're more than happy with that. And with the Enchanted Crystal Arrow, Rampage's bot lane is in a fantastic spot, potentially push down onto Rascal Jester as well. They've already taken half the turret, and with both of their ultimates available and all of their summoners, they want to be able to do something, because they're going to take potentially a lot of damage onto their top lane turret right here at around the 15-minute mark. And the first turret gold is still available. The flay goes on to Noah. He's rooted up by the Blade Collar. He's going to go down very quickly. The wall gets up. Yuki is able to devour him a little bit, but the passive coming out from Yutori, he does manage to pick it up. He does not have the Blade Collar. He does. I'm lying, and he gets barely. Yuki is barely able to use that great health to keep himself alive, and this should reward Rampage with the first turret gold onto their bot lane. Not necessarily off of this wave. They're getting a lot of damage, but they'll be able to push out this next one, and they should be able to do that. That's more than just a kill. That's about two and a half kills going down here onto Rampage. And I wonder if Dara is going to give the solo gold over to Yutori. It doesn't look like he is. That's a huge gold swing going over in favor of Rampage. Ramne is looking for Lavier once again. Gets some good damage with that early with an early Abyssal Scepter really amplifying his damage. And we just see, between the damage reduction on his W and the resistances and the natural magic resistance shield, he's not taking a lot of damage at all. And while we do see that picked up at least one assist against all of the aggression top lane, he's still down about 30 CS right now to Evie. Evie with that early Wit's End, and it looks like he's building toward, could be either the Ruin's Hurricane or the Blade of the Ruin King. Both are solid options. He's going to be able to pick up this red buff and start pressuring even further. With the first turret down, we're likely going to see a lot more movement. Tussle is caught out by Wyvern. The Let's Bounce comes out, takes him and Daisy farther into the enemy team, but the Grand Entrance gives him so much damage reduction, comes in, knocks up Lavi, and that is going to be the first kill of this fight. Wyvern is forced to flash out. Devour should be available for Yuki in a moment, but Rampage are going to call it quits and head towards the Dragon instead, as well as getting tons of damage down here towards the mid lane. There's at least Moment's teleport forced out here, but he's already down to half health right now, and where's Yutori going? It looks like they are trying to find something. Just going to get a couple of wards for their troubles. But this is a huge, huge power spike for Rampage. They finish items onto all of their members. They're getting vision over all of Rascal Jester's red side jungle. And if they're going to get good damage onto this turret as well, as we see 3 members down there. And Yutori Miyashi does an insane amount of damage with the Zeal and the Essence Reaver he's picked up. And, there's nothing to scoff at either coming out from Tussle with these ranged auto attacks. That it is going to be the second bot lane turret, as the second turret of the game to fall. There's tons of damage being put down in the mid lane. But right now, Wyvern is looking for opportunity to go into Evie, is just going to lightning rush away. So he'll be okay. And with the jungler on the top side, that's just going to give more resources over to Rampage as they do pick up this Earth Dragon. And right now, with a 5,000 gold lead, they are firmly in control of this game. At this point in the game, we do have to ask ourselves, what can Rascal Jester do to keep themselves in the game? And, well, the answer is they need to find fights where they are man advantage. They have Zac, who's still a strong pick at 1-1-1. He's still up in CS, trying to get this Rift Herald. If they can find a lane to really start snowballing, they could potentially have a counter to Yutori Miyashi. And the real answer to that, well, there's two. One of them is get Aoyama strong enough to really jump in and knock Yutori Miyashi back into the rest of the team, where it doesn't necessarily matter if he has a couple of supports, if he's going to be focused by Ashe, if he's going to be devoured by Yuki, if he's going to be hit by the unleashed power from Lavier. He's going to go down. But Aoyama is looking to be in a rough spot right now. He's already being pushed up. He's going to be put up against his cannon in the longest lane. Bot lane doesn't have any turrets for him to fall back to until the inhibitor turret, and it's just going to be dangerous for him to really move anywhere. He's not going to be able to create pressure on the map as he builds towards this Iceborne Gauntlet. And unfortunately, it's a little bit too late on the rest of the team. There's already lots of MR items coming out for Rampage. We see the Mikhails, we see the Abyssal Scepter, we see the Wit's End. Ramune flashes forward, gets a taunt onto Lavier. The death sentence is going to be your actual death sentence as another kill. 3-0-0 killing spree onto Yutori Miyashi, and they're going to get another turret here as a 5-man stack from Rampage is going to get them all these objectives. The Rift Herald is still sitting in Wyvern's inventory. That's only going to last for a couple of minutes. He is going to have to use it somewhere, and he doesn't have a good spot to put it right now. He's looking for an engage. He's going up. The elastic slingshot is flayed away by Wyvern. He's going to be in a bad spot. The Devour is going to pull Yuki and Wyvern back towards them. Wall's not quite going to connect, but Evie around the side is getting a lot of damage onto Aoyama. And the elastic slingshot round 2 coming in does get taunted up. Yutori Miyashi uses a great ultimate, but he's going to get Let's bounce back into the rest of the team as Evie comes in, doing tons of damage to Noah. And even though Yutori Miyashi's in the middle of the team, it doesn't matter. Nobody is able to focus him down, and the rest of Rampage is going to be able to do whatever they want, as we see Daisy just kind of lounging around there. Come on, Daisy. It's supposed to be a Daisy Stampede, not a Daisy recliner chair. But that was it was a neat idea for Rascal Jester. The first elastic slingshot could have been fantastic, but they also chose to fight a man down. Lavier was nowhere to be seen during most of that, having died previously, and he just came back at the very end, and I believe actually died again in the course of that in the course of that fight. And right now, Wyvern is the only member of Rascal Jester that is decently strong at all. And you kind of expect that from one of the star players on one of the strongest champions in the game. But here we go. We still have Lavier dead. Wyvern chooses to go in, does get taunted up by Romney, and is stuck, taking tons of damage. The Devour saves him from a lot, and Yuki's not going to take a whole lot of damage. But here he's like, I see round two. He goes in, elastic screenshot one more time, but the engage has already started. And with the ultimate coming out of Yutori Mayashi, dodging the immediate stun, Noah's stunned up by the slicing maelstrom, not able to get any damage back onto anyone. And Rampage is able to pick and choose their targets as they please, and they chose everyone. I would like one of every animal, please. This is Noah's Ark, and we're all going on a ride as the flood of Rampage just comes up and really takes control of the game. Ramune is too tanky to kill. He has that Warmogs. What are they going to do? Oh, Wyvern is choosing to put down the Rift Herald in the mid lane. Ramune is not going to be doing necessarily kind of damage to stop it, but he's not too worried about it. It's going to get some good damage, taking, whoa, a good half of the turret immediately. That's probably the most I've seen just about ever. Tussle is stunned up by the Enchanted Crystal Arrow so that Noah and Yuki can just walk away. They do get the mid turret, so it's not a perfect game, but it wasn't already. They had a couple of kills under their belts as Ramune and Evie do end up falling in the ill-fated dive earlier. But it's a very, very difficult spot for Rascal Jester, and now they need to start looking towards what can they do in Game 2? What did they do wrong? I think the biggest thing is they didn't necessarily expect Tussle to bring out this Ivern, and he's been having a fantastic game. He's been getting so many buffs for his teammates. We've seen, at the early game we saw at least 4 buffs being taken by Tussle. And right now, here comes Wyvern. He's trying to get a little bit. Is going to get the knockback onto Yutori, but it doesn't matter. The Grand Entrance is going to get him so much damage reduction, and you don't necessarily want to bring Evie and the rest of the people into your team. That's a triple kill going over to Xayah already. That's a quadra kill going over to Yutori Miyashi's Xayah. And at this point, if this was solo queue, we'd all be surrendering. We'd be throwing out that FF. They are just looking for Atyamomo, trying to find him. Not going to be able to do so, but they are going to start pushing down this inhibitor turret at 24 minutes. This is one of the earliest base objectives taken in the Japanese league at this point, and with over a 12k gold lead on Rampage, picking up the first inhibitor with a Mountain Drake. The next dragon hasn't even spawned yet. It's spawning in 20 seconds. Rampage is moving fast. They're moving decisively, and it's very, very effective right now. And definitely very aggressive builds coming out from their team, and that's not really particularly surprising with how effective it has been so far. Infinity Edge comes out as a third item at 25 minutes for Yutori, having previously sat on the Essence Reaver and the increased burst offered by the Static Shiv. But the Blade of the Ruin King and the Wit's End built onto Evie before picking up the increased split push power provided by the Ruin's Hurricane, and he's building towards that Frozen Mallet, just saying, hey, yeah, I do damage, I have Frozen Mallet, you're going to have to flash if you want to survive. And a lot of those flashes are going to be down. Noah and Yuki's are coming up soon, Wyvern's is not, and Lavier he's going to be in a tough spot. He's playing Syndra in this game. He's 1-4-1, having to pick up that Void Staff as a second item. Not an ideal item. Syndra's much prefer going for an early Leandries, an early Loon's Echo, and Romney looking for him one more time. Not a fun spot to be Rascal Jester in this game. And ultimately, we can't be too surprised. Wyvern's looking here. Elastic Slingshot is going to land onto Ramune. He's going to go for the knockup. He gets Yutori and Ramune again, pulling them back into the enemy team, but there's no focus damage going back onto them. Dara and Ramune are free to fire in the front lane. Yutori Miyashi picks up the first one, picks up the second one in just a moment, and Lavia has got nowhere to run right now, and that's going to be another double kill going over to Yutori Miyashi. Another one picked up by Evie. 10-0-3. On the Xayah. Teleport coming out, just going to push in these super minions, and they are going to be pushing for the game, having picked up the second Mountain Dragon. Ramune gets flash forward, gets onto Noah, tons of damage going on, and the Slicing Maelstrom comes across, but doesn't even pick up the assist. But who cares? You got the entire team in the enemy base. 26 minutes, getting a first Nexus turret. The second Nexus turret's going to go down. In Japan, you are looking fine tonight. That was some League of Legends like we haven't seen come out in a long time. Quick, decisive, powerful, aggressive, and it works. And it's because of the Ivern that Tussle was playing in this game. He enabled his team so incredibly hard, picking up so many buffs, reducing the threat that Wyvern. Oh man, that's a tongue twister. Ivern and Wyvern, but reducing the threat that Wyvern presented on that Zac. Just saying, hey, you don't clear your own jungle clear enough, so that means I get both jungles. Both jungles are Tussle's jungles in this game. And Rampage blows through Rascal Jester in the first game. And Rascal Jester, they're really going to have to go back to the drawing board. They did potentially fall to the bait of that Zac. And while it's a potentially a very dangerous, it's a gambit more than a bait, shall we say. It's definitely a gambit played by Rampage saying, hey, we believe in Tussle. We believe he's better than Wyvern. We believe that he is going to take down all the threat provided by that monster of a champion. And because of that, we're going to give Utori and Evie all of the tools they need to be successful. We've criticized a couple of other teams in the LJL previously for not providing the resources they need to on the carries on their team, but Rampage did that, and they did it in spades. Once again, this is Joshua Joshi Howard coming at you live from Seattle, Washington. That was Game 1, a dominating performance from Rampage over Rascal Jester. We're going to be getting into Game 2 in just a couple minutes, but until then, thanks for watching, and we'll be back.